returned home after months away, expecting the familiar comfort of my old life. Instead, I stepped into a world that felt completely transformed. The house still stood in its usual place, yet the atmosphere had shifted, a quiet reminder that nothing could ever be exactly as it once was. Ever since Mom married Travis Morgan a few months earlier, everything had changed. The sprawling mansion, the carefully chosen furnishings, and even the way Mom carried herself all spoke of a new order that had replaced the old. That first evening, dinner was already set when I stepped into the dining room. Travis sat at the head of the table, conversing casually with Mom, while I hesitated at the edge of the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that the warmth I once knew was now underlined by an unspoken tension. The elegant table setting, the soft hum of conversation, and the subtle glances exchanged between Travis and Mom all hinted at changes that ran deeper than D.C.O.R. I took my seat quietly, my mind racing as I tried to understand the situation. Travis's presence was undeniable. His calm demeanor and steady voice made him the center of this new household dynamic. He glanced at me briefly, and in that moment, I felt a chill that wasn't entirely due to the cool evening air. "How was your semester, Emma?" he asked in a tone that was both composed and slightly piercing. His question wasn't intrusive, yet it carried a weight that made me sit a little taller, as if I were being evaluated. "Fine," I replied, my voice betraying none of the uncertainty swirling inside me. I took a sip of my wine, more to mask the awkward silence than for the taste, and tried to blend into the background of what used to be a familiar scene. Mom, seemingly oblivious to the tension, beamed at me. "Travis has a surprise for us. We're flying to the Dominican Republic," she announced excitedly. I paused, glass in mid-air, unable to reconcile the sudden announcement with my internal sense of foreboding. A trip sounded wonderful on paper, but as I looked around at the mismatched expressions on both Mom's and Travis's faces, I couldn't help but feel that nothing was as it seemed. Travis's calm continued, his eyes not leaving mine as he added, "We'll be leaving in just a couple of days." His tone was casual, but there was an undeniable firmness in his words. The idea of an impromptu vacation with this man, a man who had essentially redefined my home, stirred a mix of emotions in me. I knew that the coming days would force me to confront changes I wasn't sure I was ready to face. As the dinner progressed, Mom tried to keep the conversation light, eagerly asking about my classes and future plans. Travis interjected occasionally with a remark or a pointed observation, his eyes lingering on me a moment too long. There was something unsettling in the way he observed everything around him, as if he were constantly assessing and calculating. His presence seemed to fill the room, leaving little space for me to simply be myself. After dinner, I volunteered to help clear the table. I needed a moment away from the intense atmosphere, a brief escape to gather my thoughts. In the kitchen, I turned on the hot water and began washing dishes. The repetitive clink of glassware and the warm rush of water did little to ease the tension in my chest. I could almost feel Travis's presence lingering in the quiet corners of the house, silent, watching, and waiting. Just as I was about to grab a towel, I caught a glimpse of Travis leaning casually in the doorway. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice devoid of any real urgency. I managed a small smile and replied, "I've got it," careful to avoid any accidental brush of our hands. His gaze held mine for a brief moment, and I sensed a silent challenge behind his calm expression. I shook it off, attributing it to nothing more than a moment of awkwardness in this strange new family setting. Later that night, as I unpacked in what used to be my room, I realized that nothing felt familiar anymore. The walls were painted in the same colors, yet the vibe was off, new curtains had been hung, and even the layout of the room subtly changed. I dropped my bag on the bed and scrolled through my phone, trying to find solace in the digital world. A text from Mom popped up, buzzing with excitement about the upcoming trip. "Travis has been planning this for weeks," it read. I couldn't bring myself to reply, instead losing myself in the endless scroll of my feeds while the uneasy feeling of being watched persisted. There was something unnerving about the house that night. The hallway light flickered, and the door to my room was left slightly ajar, as if inviting me to notice every detail of this altered environment. I closed and locked the door firmly, hoping to push away the creeping dread. But as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door handle, I couldn't shake the sense that this trip to the Dominican Republic would be more than just a holiday. It would mark the beginning of a series of events that would change everything. The next morning arrived with an air of reluctant acceptance. I woke early to find Mom bustling around the living room, surrounded by suitcases and an energy that was almost infectious. "Travis is taking care of the flights," she explained, barely glancing up from the packing. "You should pack light, mostly beach stuff." I nodded absently, my thoughts still heavy from the night before. Curiosity got the better of me as I glanced toward the stairs. I wondered where Travis might be as Mom prepared for the trip. "Where is he?" I asked, and Mom's smile remained undimmed. "He'll be back soon," she assured me as she carefully folded a swimsuit. "Isn't this great, Emma? A family trip." Her enthusiasm was palpable, a stark contrast to the silent storm brewing within me. Outside, the quiet of the driveway was disrupted by the sound of an engine. I watched as Travis's sleek, black SUV rolled into the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel. He stepped out, his sunglasses firmly in place, and carried an unidentifiable piece of furniture that hinted at the ongoing changes within our home. He gave a brief nod of acknowledgement as he passed by, his presence as commanding as ever. As I stood on the porch, I couldn't help but wonder what the next few days would bring. The impending trip promised sun, sea, and sand, a welcome distraction from the unsettling changes at home, but deep down, I knew that the real challenge was facing the person who had so dramatically altered my life. Travis, with his calm yet intense demeanor, had become a constant, inescapable figure in my daily routine, and every encounter left me with more questions than answers. I took a deep breath, trying to muster some optimism about the trip. Perhaps this vacation could be a chance to find some clarity, a momentary escape from the overwhelming presence that now defined my home. Yet, as I stepped back inside, I carried with me the lingering sensation of being an outsider in a place that was once my sanctuary. With the trip fast approaching, the next few days promised to be a turning point, a time when the old life I once knew would be irrevocably changed by the new reality that Travis represented. And as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't help but feel that I was about to step into a future that was as uncertain as it was inevitable. We landed in Bali on a bright, sweltering afternoon. The moment we stepped off the plane, the humid tropical air and the island's vibrant energy embraced us. The sun, high and unrelenting, bathed everything in a surreal, golden glow as its rays danced on the runway. A private driver greeted us warmly, and soon we were whisked away from the airport toward a luxurious resort nestled among lush rice terraces and swaying palm trees, a true escape from our everyday troubles. The resort was like a hidden paradise. Its architecture blended modern comfort with traditional Balinese design, featuring intricately carved wooden doors, open-air pavilions, and water features that reflected the serenity of the island. As our vehicle wound its way through narrow, tree-lined paths, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Despite the breathtaking scenery, there was an undercurrent of tension that reminded me our arrival here wasn't just about a vacation, it was also about confronting the changes that had uprooted my life back home. When we arrived, Mom practically floated off the vehicle, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the resort's ornate entrance and tranquil gardens. "Isn't this amazing, Emma?" she exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement as she snapped photos with her phone. Meanwhile, Travis moved with a quiet efficiency. He checked the luggage with a scrutinizing glance, then accompanied us as we carried our bags inside. His presence was a steady reminder of the new order that had taken over our lives, one that I was still struggling to understand. Once inside our villa, a spacious, open-concept retreat with a private plunge pool and a view of the manicured tropical gardens, I found myself seeking a quiet moment away from the festive bustle. While Mom immediately began exploring every corner and chatting with the staff about local attractions, Travis methodically ensured every detail of the villa was in order. I slipped away to the edge of the pool, seeking a few minutes to gather my thoughts. The sound of water gently lapping against the edge and the soft rustling of fronds provided a temporary respite from the thoughts that constantly swirled in my mind. As I sat there with a chilled glass of iced tea, I felt the persistent gaze of Travis. Before long, he joined me at the poolside, his demeanor calm and measured. "Relax, Emma," he said softly, his tone neither patronizing nor intrusive. "You deserve some time to enjoy this place." I managed a polite smile, though I couldn't fully shake the mix of gratitude and wariness that his presence evoked. His words carried a double edge. On one hand, they were comforting, yet on the other, they underscored the unspoken tension between us. Over the course of the afternoon, the resort gradually came alive. Guests strolled along the pathways, laughter mingled with the distant sound of traditional gamelan music, and the aromatic scent of incense and tropical flowers filled the air. I found myself oscillating between moments of wonder at the beauty around me and moments of introspection about the changes in my life. Every time I glanced at Travis, he seemed to be silently assessing the situation, his eyes reflecting an intensity that both unsettled and intrigued me. Eventually, the inevitable conversation between us took shape. Standing by a secluded corner of the pool, I ventured, "This place is incredible, isn't it? But sometimes I wonder if we're really leaving our past behind, or just carrying it with us in different forms." Travis regarded me quietly for a moment, his gaze steady and thoughtful. "Leaving behind isn't always about escape," he said carefully. "It's about finding new ways to understand where we come from. Even here, the past has a way of following us." His words, spoken in his even tone, resonated with me. There was an honesty in them that I hadn't expected. Our conversation was soon interrupted by Mom's cheerful return. With her, she brought plans for the day, a visit to a nearby cultural village, a traditional dance performance, and a cooking class where we could learn to prepare Balinese dishes. As she animatedly described the itinerary, Travis and I exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the complexities we both carried. There was a part of me that longed to dive deeper into understanding Travis's intentions and the role he now played in our lives, but that inquiry was drowned out by the lively energy Mom exuded. That evening, we all gathered for dinner at the resort's beachfront restaurant. The setting was nothing short of magical, candlelit tables on the soft sand, the gentle murmur of the ocean serving as a natural symphony, and a menu that boasted both local specialties and international favorites. The ambience was warm and intimate, the kind that made you forget the rest of the world existed beyond the crashing waves. At the table, Mom's enthusiasm was infectious as she recounted her day's discoveries, while Travis quietly ensured that every detail was attended to, from the perfect placement of a flower arrangement to the careful selection of wine that would complement our meal. I sat there, absorbing the lively chatter and the rhythmic sound of the tide, all the while aware of the silent undercurrent between Travis and me. Every glance he threw my way carried layers of unspoken meaning, hinting at emotions and intentions that I wasn't sure I wanted to confront just yet. After dinner, I slipped away for a brief respite, finding solace in a quiet corner of the restaurant's patio. The night was cool, the starry sky stretching above, and the sound of gentle waves mingled with distant island music. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the soothing sounds lull my racing thoughts. It was in that fleeting silence that I resolved to be more mindful of my own feelings, acknowledging the beauty of Bali while also preparing for the emotional complexities that lay ahead. Later that night, back at the villa, the atmosphere shifted into a quiet, reflective calm. Mom retired early, still buzzing from the day's adventures, and even Travis seemed to settle into a respectful quiet as the night deepened. I found myself alone on the villa's balcony, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the warmth of the day. The gentle glow of lanterns and the distant hum of nighttime insects created a cocoon of solitude, and I allowed myself to simply be, with no one's gaze upon me, no expectations, just the sound of my own thoughts. I couldn't help but replay the day's moments, the vibrant colors of Bali, the intriguing conversation with Travis, and the undeniable pull of the island's energy. Despite the outward beauty and serenity, I was acutely aware that this vacation was not merely an escape from daily life. It was a turning point, a moment to confront the changes within myself and to reassess the complex relationships that defined my world. Travis's quiet yet intense presence reminded me that every new beginning carried with it the weight of the past, and that sometimes, in order to move forward, one had to confront the truths they'd been avoiding. As I gazed out over the softly lit gardens and the gentle ripple of the private pool below, I made a silent promise to approach tomorrow with a renewed sense of openness and caution. Bali was a place of healing and transformation, but it also demanded that I face the uncertainties of my own heart. With that thought lingering in my mind, I stepped back inside, ready to embrace whatever the next day might bring. Over the next few days in Bali, the island's beauty began to weave itself into the fabric of my thoughts, yet the emotional undercurrents between Travis and me grew ever more palpable. Each morning, as the sun rose in brilliant hues over the rice terraces, I found myself caught in a silent struggle between the allure of this new beginning and the persistent tension that seemed to shadow every interaction with him. During a guided tour through a centuries-old temple complex, I noticed Travis trailing a few steps behind me. His presence was silent but undeniable, as if he were determined to remain part of my every experience, even here, amid ancient stone and whispered prayers. At one point, while I paused to admire an intricately carved doorway, he approached slowly. "These temples have a way of reminding us that life is a series of transitions," he said quietly. His words, measured and reflective, stirred something deep within me, a mix of admiration for the enduring beauty of the past and an unsettling awareness of our own shifting identities. That evening, back at the villa, the conversation between us took on a more personal tone. After dinner, while Mom had retired early, Travis and I found ourselves alone in the softly lit living room. The sound of a gentle rain on the roof created a cocoon of intimacy that contrasted sharply with the cool detachment we often maintained in public. "Emma," he began, hesitating for a moment before continuing, "I know things have changed since I came into your life. I'm not here to erase your past or redefine who you are." His tone was earnest, his eyes searching mine for any sign of understanding. I swallowed hard, the mix of apprehension and curiosity churning inside me. "But everything feels so different," I admitted. "I feel like I'm caught between who I used to be and who I'm becoming." My voice wavered as I confessed the internal conflict that had plagued me since arriving on the island. Travis's gaze softened, and for a moment, the usual guarded intensity gave way to vulnerability. "Change can be frightening," he said slowly, "but sometimes it's the only way to grow. I'm here because I believe we both deserve a chance to understand ourselves better, even if it means confronting uncomfortable truths." His words, though gentle, resonated with an honesty I had not expected. In that quiet space, the distance between us seemed to shrink, replaced by a tentative bridge of shared experiences and emotions. In the following days, I sought solace in solitary walks along the beach at dawn. The rhythmic crashing of waves, the cool sand beneath my feet, and the vast, unending horizon gave me time to reflect on my life and the strange turns it had taken. I wondered if I could ever reconcile the person I was with the person I was becoming. There were moments when I felt a deep gratitude for this unexpected journey, a journey that challenged me to re-examine my values, my relationships, and even my own identity. Travis, too, seemed to wrestle with his inner conflicts. Occasionally, I would catch him gazing out over the ocean with a pensive look, as if the vastness of the sea mirrored the complexity of his own thoughts. One afternoon, while we were both sitting on the veranda of our villa, he finally broke the silence. "Sometimes, I wonder if I'm trying too hard to fill a void that shouldn't be mine to fill," he said quietly. The admission struck me with a mix of sympathy and surprise. In that fleeting moment, I realized that behind his composed exterior lay a man burdened by his own past and uncertainties. Our conversations, though measured and careful, began to peel away the layers of pretense that had kept us at arm's length. We talked about everything, from our personal hopes and regrets to the weight of expectations imposed by family and circumstance. There was an unspoken understanding that our dialogue was as much about finding ourselves as it was about understanding each other. Yet, despite this emerging connection, I remained cautious. I had learned not to let my guard down too quickly, even in the face of sincere vulnerability. As the end of our Bali stay drew near, the island seemed to hold its breath, as if anticipating the decisions that lay ahead. I often found myself standing at the threshold of the villa's wide, open doors, looking out over the gardens and the distant ocean, feeling the pull of two worlds, the familiar past and the uncharted future. In those moments, the choices I faced felt heavier than the humid air that surrounded me. Travis's parting words on our final night in Bali echoed in my mind long after the festivities ended. "I hope you can find a way to honor your past without letting it define your future," he said softly as we stood on the balcony under a sky sprinkled with stars. That night, as I lay awake listening to the gentle murmur of the night and the distant surf, I realized that this journey was not about choosing one identity over another. It was about embracing the complexity of change, accepting that every ending is also a beginning. With Bali fading into memory, I understood that our time on the island had given me the courage to confront my inner conflicts. The road ahead was uncertain, and the emotions that Travis and I shared would continue to evolve. Yet, in the quiet aftermath of our Bali days, I felt a renewed resolve to navigate the crossroads of my heart and mind, one step, one conversation at a time. As our time in Bali drew to a close, I felt the weight of every lesson learned during our stay. The island had been a mirror reflecting both my inner conflicts and the hope for renewal. Now, standing in the cool early morning light on the villa's terrace, I realized that this journey was not simply an escape, it was the final step in accepting who I was becoming. The drive back to reality was quiet and introspective. On the way to the airport, I watched the lush green landscapes blur past, each scene a reminder of the vibrant life I had briefly experienced here. Travis sat silently beside me, his gaze occasionally drifting to the horizon. There was a solemn understanding between us, a recognition that while our time in Bali had brought us closer to our true selves, it had also forced us to confront painful truths we might have otherwise ignored. Back home, the familiar surroundings now felt different. The mansion, the same imposing structure as before, had become a stage for our ongoing transformation. The tension between the old life and the new was palpable. I could no longer ignore the subtle changes in my own behavior, the cautious optimism, the willingness to face my past, and the determination to forge a future that was uniquely mine. Travis's parting words during our final night on the island still echoed in my mind. Honor your past, but do not let it define your future. In the quiet moments that followed his departure, I began to see that the true resolution was not in choosing one identity over another, but in embracing the fullness of who I was. It was about acknowledging the pain, the hope, and the quiet strength that had blossomed within me during those transformative days. In the days that followed, I found myself gradually opening up to the possibility of change. Conversations with Mom became more reflective, and even Travis's presence, once a source of silent tension, now carried a hint of mutual respect. We no longer danced around unspoken words. Instead, we accepted that our shared past, no matter how complicated, was part of our journey. I began to carve out small moments for myself, a quiet walk in the garden, a long phone call with a friend, a journal filled with thoughts and aspirations. Each act was a declaration of independence and a step toward healing. By the time the new season arrived, I had learned to balance my memories with the promise of the future. Bali had taught me that transformation is never linear, and that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. Though the challenges were far from over, I felt ready to face them, armed with the wisdom of my past and the courage to step forward into a future where I could finally be true to myself.